An Empire of Ice and Fire by Longclaw 1-6, Chapter 69, Battle of Highgarden Part 2. Ooh. Captain Harry Strickland steadied his nerves, swigging from a skin of sour wine. Not good at all. Highgarden village was a goddamn slaughterhouse, and the lead thousands of his men blundering into a village aflame at a castle secured by wildlings. Fucking wildlings, he muttered. Tales of them crossed the narrow sea and made Airboy and Bravos shiver. It was quite fitting for Joffrey's propaganda organs that the Imperial Cabal had both them and a Dothraki in their army. The sound of a galloping dispatch rider seemed to be a herald of bad news in this battle. Strickland felt his head pound upon hearing it. "Captain!" Turning his head, Strickland saw it wasn't a courier, but a junior knight, armour drenched in blood, obviously not his, or he would be long dead. "The Starks have taken the heights of Luthor!" "Fuck me!" At once, Strickland urged his horse into a full gallop. "Follow me, sir!" The trampled grass, littered with corpses or pieces of corpses starting to bloat and attract flies, passed by in a blur as he rode with a singular mission. "I told that fucking idiot! I fucking told him!" But just because he was a sellsword fighting for gold, his opinions were worth nothing. Or it was his relation to the Blackfur bastards of House Targaryen? "Fuck gold, the king can have it!" he hissed under his breath. He fought for his men. A loud battery of rockets letting loose a deadly payload to the left of a marching column, Strickland pulled back the reins. Two stunned commanders deftly bowed from their horses at their leader. "Captain, what is this the last column of men?" Strickland demanded. Yes, Captain. We were waiting for Lord Lannister's orders to send us forward." "How many?" 4,000, sir." Fuck. Not nearly enough, though Tywin was undoubtedly sending the last of the cavalry reserve. "Any Westerlands forces?" 2,000 kept in reserve. "That will have to do. Full about face, and bring whatever rockets you have. We're going back to the heights." The commander blinked. "But Lord Lannister's orders went out of the window once the fucking Starks took the fucking heights from under our noses. If we don't take them back, then they can roll up our forces into the town. Don't fuck with my orders and move." It didn't take a moment before the new orders were barked out along the line. On the hill, Jon watched as Grey Worm raced toward his command, Rhaegal breathing softly under his rider, resting his fatigued wings while he had a chance. "Are you sure this will work, Pod?" "No, but I have a good feeling about this, sire, especially with the new unit." "New unit?" Jon looked at the collection of odd soldiers he had never seen before. They appeared to be a mix of Westerosi and Essosi, sporting pointed helmets and short stubs of wood. They looked to be a mix of sword and spear cannon, mounted barrels sticking out from the front, and slivers of rope tied to the base. A man that appeared to be the leader, a rather decrepit lad with a thick bushy beard and leather armour, bowed. "Your Majesty, Thomas Mackenzie, captain of the 1st Hand Cannon Battalion." "Hand cannon?" Jon shifted atop Rhaegal, wishing to get airborne before a scorpion could zero in on him, as had happened outside of Winterfell. "Another Miranese invention?" "Aye." He shifted the device, which looked like a bulky crossbow without the bowstring. "It ain't much to look at, but it packs a punch." "We've got 500 of us. Where shall we be?" Jon pondered this. "Podrick, where are the crossbowmen?" "In the front lines with the Unsullied, sire. We don't have enough to cover my hoplites, so I'm moving our longbowmen there." "Put Sir Mackenzie's men with the hoplites." He turned back to Mackenzie. "Good luck, Sir Tomias. Do me proud." The officer beamed, showing a mouthful of white teeth. Odd considering his outward appearance. "You can count on us, sire." Smiling back, at one mental command, Jon sent Rhaegal leaping into the air. Narrowing his eyes, Grey Worm watched as over double the number of his men of the Golden Company predominating, marching forward. This would be no mad charge out of formation, but their commanders kept them within a preset shield wall. It was no matter, though. The Unsullied had faced worse odds and triumphed. They could defeat 20,000 Dothraki screamers at the Battle of Qohor in ancient lore with similar numbers. They could defeat only 6,000 men-at-arms. "Unsullied!" he cried out, voice carrying over the field. "Form phalanx formation!" Professional, seamless. The 10-line-deep unsullied force glided into their lightly drilled battle formation. The first line dropped into a crouch, spears forward. The next 3 raised their round metal shields in a solid shield wall, as tight as any of the Lannisters. The 3 lines behind dropping their spears forward, coating the shield wall with extra bristles ready to stab forward at any attackers. A line of crossbowmen, an addition insisted by the Emperor and Lord Robb Stark, readied their weapons, bolts tipped with the sharpest steel short of Valyrian. Rounding out the formation, 2 lines of backup spearmen waited, weapons held high. "Charge!" screamed the Lannister commanders at near point-blank range, only 50 feet down the slope of the heights from the unsullied line. The shield walls surged forward with a mad battle cry. Aside from the bellowing roar of the mighty form of Wun-Wun, staff at the ready and chainmail protecting him from underneath his furs, the only response from the Unsullied were the whoosh of the firing crossbows as they unleashed their deadly payload. Scores dropped as the barbed bolts punched through shields and armor, but not enough to stop the assault. Spears and feet firmly embedded in the gradual sloping soil of the heights, the Unsullied line barely buckled as the Golden Company and a Red Cloak slammed into them. Blood spattered everywhere as shields stabbed and sliced into flesh, hacking limbs and rupturing organs. The front line dropped their spears, drawing short swords to duel with the attackers, and the rear lines gradually gave ground at the sheer mass of humanity pushing them back. Not too much, however. The Golden Company felt the weight of the Unsullied position on the high ground. It was far more tiring to charge uphill than retreat uphill. With the bulk of the Red Cloak shifting to flank them, Grey Worm barked orders to send in his reserves of 1,000 men to patch up the left before they charged into the fray himself. To his left, Wun-Wun fought off his weight in enemy men, braving fire from arrows and battling aside spears, and his log broke dozens of men like ragdolls. All hopes now rested in the other third of his command and the Northern Hoplites. Even the Unsullied couldn't survive heavy cavalry in their rear. Trumpets stuttered as the lines and lines of heavy cavalry formed up along the shallow hill 1 mile from the heights. 5,000 horses, veterans of countless victories and defeats, never from want of fighting spirit or skill in combat. Plate armour of man and steed glinted in the noonday sun, banners of dozens of Westerlands houses fluttering along the sea of lances. They weren't sworn bannermen of Lord Randall Tarly, but he still saw them as his soldiers. He had led them since Tigert Lannister died by dragonfire, following the Battle of Riverrun, and the knights beloved the taciturn scowling noblemen of the Reach. Along the front of the line, resting on his horse alongside the personal standard-bearer of House Tarly, was Randall Tarly's son and heir. Strapping in his plate armour, Dickon Tarly was the son Randall had hoped for. A little timid and green, but a worthy successor of the Lord of Hornhill. Better than that worthless tub of an older son. "Father, it seems the Golden Company are engaging the Unsullied." At least Captain Strickland has some initiative. He wiped the sweat off his brow. "And what are we facing?" "Unsullied along the flanks, with Northern Hoplites in the centre." Dickon paled. "All rockets have been committed to the flanks. I don't think we can break through." He shut up once Tarly smacked him about the head. "Enough of that, boy! You're acting like your fat coward of a brother." Tigert Lannister was an overconfident idiot getting smashed by wildlings at Riverrun. If the Dothraki could break through a shield wall, then the finest heavy cavalry of the world could smash through this line. "Knights of Westeros! We stand at the last defence against a foreign queen. Our king is born of our land, while the queen and her bastard lover over foreign shores, leading an army of savages. Will we let the Unsullied slaves pollute the Reach?" "No!" came the cry. "Will we let the Dothraki hordes rape and murder their way through this fair land?" "No!" Tarly drew his sword. "Then forward! Forward with me, boys, until every last eunuch and northern traitor lies dead upon this field!" Trumpets blaring, thousands of men and horses began their trot forward. Over half a mile away from the action, in the eastern heights, the remaining third of the Unsullied and the Northern Hoplites stared at the Lannister cavalry lurched south from across the green, grassy plains. They had yet to see action at all since the Battle of the Coast Road months before, and were itching for payback on some of the swine that had defeated their countrymen at the God's Eye. Snarling direwolves on their shields were freshly painted. New steel tips adorning their pikes. All cast a wary gaze at the new arrivals. Mackenzie's men cleaning the barrels of their hand cannons and checking their powder to make sure it was all dry and in the still damp air. All trembled internally, and some externally, at the wall of incoming heavy cavalry. Line loose, as soon as the enemy knights began to move from their starting position, Podrick gave the new orders. "Form squares! On the double!" Podrick had plenty of time to drill and train his men in the hot sun of Meereen. Studies of the old Valyrian tactics convinced him of a method to destroy the impact of a heavy cavalry charge, and had imprinted his men in the tactics accordingly. With the fluid moves of battles past, the northern hoplites quick march halfway down the slope of the hill as the knights were building early momentum. Ranks converged in a 4-man deep hollow box-like formation. A wall of shields in front, 2 spearmen behind, and a 4th line of Sir Mackenzie's hand cannon. Nestled within was a single cannon. Over a dozen of these squares now protected the approaches of the hill, unsullied phalanx guarding either side. Young Dick Ontali saw the threat first. "Father!" he called out over the sounds of thousands of hoofbeats, but Randall Tarley didn't hear it, or simply didn't care. Drawing his sword, the Lord of Horn Hill raised it high and ordered the most powerful attack short of dragons. The Westerosi heavy cavalry charge. Lances dropped till they pointed straight at the enemy. The knights yelled and whooped as they urged their horses as fast as they could go. General formation was broken as a ragged wave of men and horse trampled over grassy fields to cover the ground between them and the northerners. "Hold steady!" yelled Podrick. "We'll fuck them up!" many northerners shouted at the same time. "Make ready!" Captain Mackenzie barked for his men, ready to test the new leap in warfare. They saw the large masses of cavalry advance, the awful grandeur of the finest knights of the realm charging towards them. Hoof-beats kicking up clumps of dirt and grass, armour rattling as the army screamed their battle cries. It glittered like a stormy wave of the sea catching the sunlight. The very ground seemed to vibrate beneath their feet. All wanted to run, but stayed put. Podrick shouted his final command. "Prepare to receive cavalry!" Every man in the front ranks embedded their shields into the dirt, dropping their spears to form a wall bristling with steel, held together by steady hands, as the charge slammed into the squares. The charge ended suddenly all along the line. Men and horse alike were run through by spears, hand cannons firing at near point-blank range. Knights tumbled to the ground in bloody heaps. Ripples of fire from the new weapons tore through the lines, and the highly trained men having to work to miss all the closeness. Piles of writhing mounts drenched in blood and gore stalling the rear lines as it gave them a trying to storm the squares. Momentum stalled. The knights found themselves without the power to run through the squares. Skittish mounts, nostrils flush with the metallic smell of blood and ears overloaded with the shrieks of their wounded brethren, refused to advance against the wall of spears. Whooping rhythmically, the hoplites stabbed forward with their pikes, catching many a knight off guard, but targeting the mounts themselves. Behind, the hand cannoneers shifted to at-will firing. Their rate was slow and the weapons cumbersome, but taken together at point-blank range they inflicted countless death. Rounds tore through weak points in armour, flat lead shredding flesh in garish wounds the opposite of more clean arrowheads. As quickly as their crews could reload them, the cannon boomed downhill, felling man and horse alike. In desperation, the Lannisters ordered a withdrawal, only to try again half an hour later, but with their scorpions firing directly into the squares. The bolts were deadly, running through 2 or 3 at a time and impossible for shields to defend against, but they soon became the targets of the hand cannons. Even at a long range of 100 yards, the rounds were something to fear. Podrick Payne's squares refused to break, hoplites continuing to stab forward with their pikes, even as many of their comrades fell dead within the protective confines of their shields. But the distraction of the scorpions opened up the skies. Free of anti-air fire, the Emperor swooped down onto the battlefield. He had been waiting for the right opportunity, and with no other reserves left, he took it. Fire escaped from Rhaegal's maw in short, deadly bursts that incinerated scores. Whatever formation that Randall Tarley or his cavalry commanders evaporated into ash. The green form of the Emperor's mount turning clusters of knights and each scorpion into a blazing inferno. "On by! To the east!" A roar carrying over the sounds of wind and battle signalled the dragon's acknowledgement. Soon John saw many red cloaks assaulting the unsullied lines. "Dracarys!" Hundreds of screams added themselves to the piercing cacophony. Whatever coherence in their foes was destroyed. Simultaneously and exclusively, Podrick and Grey Worm gave both a single order. "Advance!" The hoplite square broke apart as the men charged with drawn swords into the now shattered heavy cavalry. The unsullied charged forward, breaking the Golden Company in a headlong retreat. Skillful manoeuvring by Grey Worm and the one-man battalion of 1-1, swinging his log, cut off all retreat north, forcing Strickland to withdraw towards Highgarden itself, springing the trap John had envisioned in his mind upon looking at this very ground days before. Flames licking at his clothes, Randall Tarley fought with the reins to ease his panicking mount. All around him, the once beautiful heights of Luthor had been enveloped in a scene from the hells themselves. The stench of death and burnt flesh was everywhere. He had lost track of everyone. Once a magnificent fighting force, Dragonfire and the dogged counterattack by the Imperials had torn the force into a shell of its former self. More knights fleeing, or even surrendering, then were standing to fight like proper gentlemen. In the distance, he spotted a massive giant, white beard matted with blood as he swung a massive bow as clusters of dismounted knights. Gritting his teeth, Randall Tarley would not go down without honour. Ripping a lance out of the ground where it rested next to its dead bearer, he snapped the reins and sent his mount into a charge. "Forward! Forward!" Wind passing through him, followed by a blow to the shoulder from a hand cannon. He felt nothing. Only the exhilaration of the charge. This was his moment. In defeat, the bards would still sing the tale of the final charge of Randall Tarley of Hornhill. Grabbing a fleeing knight, Dongo flung him backwards, the man screaming as he hurtled to certain death. The oldest of the giants, clocking at over 2 centuries, he tired quicker than Mag or 1-1. His reflexes dulled from fatigue. Dongo didn't notice the mounted threat that was until it was too close. Crying out, he brought his bow in a wild roundhouse. Too late. The lance embedded itself in the giant's heart, steel tips slicing through mail, flesh and bone alike. A split second before, the bow slammed into Randall Tarley with the force of a cannonball. He was knocked off of his horse by 20 feet, ribcage shattering and organs rupturing. Unable to talk, Randall could still lift his head slightly to see Dongo fall to his knees. As the last breath left his body, Randall heard the old giant let out a great bellow that resonated across the battlefield, a fitting sound to herald the end of the struggles for the heights of Luthor. Meanwhile, the westernmost part of the battlefield was engulfed in the sounds of battle. Lord Royce's heavy cavalry began to assault the sellswords after eventually arriving at the correct position in the field, charging again and again under heavy cover from the Dothraki horse archers. To the east, Edmure Tully relieved pressure upon Gendry's Stormlanders by ordering his auxiliaries out of their trenches in a furious counterattack as Prince Trystane was licking his wounds. Edmure's men halted the Lannister assaults further to the east, permitting Gendry to send Mag the Mighty and 2 battalions commanded by Selwyn Tarth into the fray through a gap between the lines of the Crownlands and the Dornish. The ensuing melee was churned up thousands, years, and even decades of hatred, spewing out through blade and the shield. Tully then led his bannermen against Alyssander Stayman's men. The furious Riverlanders charged, shattering the courage of the forces once commanded by Renly Baratheon and forcing them from the field. He wanted to pursue, but Edmure countermanded, ordering them west as a new player arrived on the scene. Watching from above, Daenerys smirked evilly as the 5,000 Dothraki under Khal Khafro, one of the vassal warlords she had promoted, charged along the floodplains from the north. She had ordered he detach his forces and ford the Mander to the south, only for them to find the ford again further to the north. It had nearly thinned the cavalry screen to where it was become worthless, but the gamble had paid off. "Dracarys!" she ordered, but not for Edaron. She couldn't help but let out the same wolf howl as her husband's men were wont to do as Sansenia, Raella, and Leonaris dove from the heavens where they had waited, small forms impossible to aim at by the artillery below. Dragonfire glands releasing their fiery payloads, not enough to destroy whole swaths of men, but enough to destroy the scorpions and rocket batteries. Edaron soon let out a roar of his own as he dove to the battlefield. General panic now seizing the army of the Divine Chimera as the Dothraki relief force slammed into the rear. Much of the cavalry force, especially the sellswords, commitment to fight for Joffrey only as good as the usefulness of the gold that paid them, abandoned the field in all possible directions. Some tried to flee west via the fording at the Mander River. This proved deadly, as the Imperial artillery pounded into the defenceless men, while the fast current drowned many. Heavy armour of the defected Knights of House Corbray proved the doom in the torrent, one of the lost scores being the traitor Lord Lyn Corbray himself. Free of the harassing cavalry, Lord Royce rallied the Knights of the Vale to slam into the flank of the Lannister left as they had at Riverrun. In an effective double-pronged assault, they and half of the Tully's men smashed through the enemy. Exhausted from endless assaults and facing the might of the Dragon Empress, the Crown Lands forces disintegrated, most surrendering. Prince Trystane, the man responsible for leading the attack in the centre, was completely drunk and attempting to flee, only for his own men to rise up against him in a mutiny. Staidman attempted to cover his withdrawal with whatever archers he could find, gallantly managing to hold back the other half of the Riverlanders before the hoofbeats of the Dothraki approached from the side. Beleaguered, he ordered his command to lower their banner and give up their arms. Bending the knee to Empress Daenerys and Gendry Baratheon not long after. After witnessing some of the bloodiest fighting in centuries, the western sector fell silent. Within Highgarden Castle, the outer courtyard spanning over 2 acres, the battle for the Jewel of the Reach only grew bogged down within the various barricades and strongpoints Yazen Zogaraz had set up the previous day. They would switch sides frequently, free folk or Esossi retaking them, only for Sir Steffon Stackspear's Redcloaks to capture them in a spear point minutes later. Arrows and bolts flew about with reckless abandon, many of the free folk growing tired and demoralized, something their commander couldn't tolerate. Kissed by fire, the passion within the Ginger transformed into a pure fury during battle. Such could only be the explanation driving the ferocity of Tormund Giantsbane. Drenched in the blood of countless enemies, he only leapt further into the fray, axes smashing through steel helmets of Redcloaks. An arrow slammed into his chest, Lannister soldiers watching with horror as he merely ripped it out with a snarl, turning to his men. "Come on, you worthless morons! You want to live forever!" A guttural roar left the throat of thousands of free folk. Disorganized and near feral, they were no less veterans than the Redcloaks they faced. Survivors of countless battles, of thousands of brushes with death against the Night's Watch, the elements, and the most terrifying forces known to man or gods. Esossi arrows and cannon fire giving them cover, Tormund rallied them into a berserker charge straight for the Lannister footholds within the outer courtyard. Walls shaking from the near constant cannonade outside, Sansa and Marjorie huddled with the other non-combatants, the latter clutching her growing belly, whispering reassurances to the baby within. The former sat stoically, fighting the urge to break down in the uncertainty of her loved one's mortality. Each nearly jumped out of their skin as the door swung open. Davos, gripping his sword, slackened at the smile on Yazon Zogaraz's lips. "The castle is secure." Sansa almost collapsed to the floor as her attention dissipated. Outside the wall, Sir Bronn found himself being shaken back into consciousness. "Get up, fucker," Lady Tyene urged, though he could sense a tinge of concern in her tone. Concern which morphed into a relieved glint in her eyes. He groaned and pushed himself to his feet. "Nice to see you back in the land of the living." Bronn looked up to see Robb Stark on horseback. at the van of a large column of northern men. "Your lady was beside herself with worry over you." Expecting an insult, he fought back a grin as the brutal Tywin Martell blushed slightly. Bronze smoked softly. "Aye, I always said Dornish girls were crazy." That got him a punch to the arm. "Shit, I've just survived a rocket attack, woman!" "You'd be dead from that rocket if it weren't for me," she hissed back, nevertheless glad he was alive. "The Unsullied are advancing on the town from the heights. We're readying a counterattack to complete the envelopment. In or out?" "I ain't done fighting for the fucking day." Picking his sword up from the ground, the former sellsword fell into step with the other warriors. News travelled faster over a battlefield. Heralds of victory found their way to the troops as rapidly as a sprinting cheetah, while sirens of defeat doubled with such speed. With Harry Strickland in full-on retreat, the news had infiltrated the ranks of the Red Cloaks just as the young wolf slammed into them with 500 fresh troops. Green as they were, the coming floods of thousands of bloodied them perfectly. Not even the most elite of Tywin's grand force cared to do battle, with certain death awaited them if they did. All they cared about was getting out of the accursed town with their lives. Kevan Lannister watched the group of fleeing men with fury. "Get back and fight!" Harry Strickland was having none of it. "My men are fleeing north. The flocking Unsullied will catch us in a vice. Spearstack's already surrendered. It's over. No, we can still turn this around." A fist slammed into Kevan's cheek, toppling him from his horse. "It's fucking over! Do you hear me?" Strickland screamed. A cannonball slammed into an empty rocket wagon only exemplified his point. Seeing the nobleman cower in the dirt, he summoned his herald. "Sound surrender!" He looked at the marching Unsullied, eunuchs holding the tightly disciplined formation. "And find me a white flag!" With the single call of the trumpet, the sounds of battle and death upon the walls of Highgarden ceased. Surrounded, rather than fight to the death, the Golden Company and the Westerland Red Cloaks laid down their arms. It would be Lord Robb Stark of Winterfell and Lady Tywin Martell of Sunspear that would receive Sir Kevan Lannister and Harry Strickland in surrender. For all intents and purposes, the Battle of Highgarden had ended. Tywin Lannister could not believe what he was seeing. The finest fighting force in the history of Westeros, one he had spent years building, one that he had defeated countless foes with, the army that had made Dorne howl. It was disintegrating before his very eyes. Thousands killed, tens of thousands before his very eyes. Thousands, tens of thousands, putting down their weapons and surrendering. Whole houses bending the knees to the Targaryens. It cannot be. But it was, and the massive shape that slammed into the ground to his left only hammered it home. "Lord Tywin Lannister." It was a dragon. The great green dragon. And that could only mean one thing. The figure emerged in view, clad in a leather cuirass, the same as Ned Stark, only black as the night. Jon Snow. Gone was the timid, tired soul on display at the dragon pit. Need a dragon to face me. Instead, Tywin saw a conqueror, a mighty warrior, so much like his father, Rhaegar, only now with a fiery anger lacking in either. A controlled madness levelled for him and him alone. Jon drew Longclaw, not batting an eye as Rhaegar roared and took airborne. "I have no need for a dragon. This is between you and me." He snarled as he brought Longclaw down, striking Tywin's hastily drawn blade. "You had my father killed. My siblings murdered." Another snarl, another clash of steel. "They will be avenged." The two highborns duelled, blades clashing as they fought with wild abandon. Tywin fought like his life depended on it, facing the eyes of the dragon wolf. But his age had caught up to him. Against a far greater swordsman than he ever had been in his prime, the strain and fatigue Jon dealt took their toll. Only for his guards setting upon the lad. Jon had only a split second to react as a spear nearly skewered him. But he had fought White Walkers. Red Cloaks were nothing much to him. One's head already rolling to the ground as he engaged with the blade of the other. But in his confidence he failed to see a third sneak up on him. "Time to die, wolf boy!" one Lannister guard whooped. His charging battle cry morphed into a gurgling gasp as a sword rammed its way through his back. Looking to his left, Longclaw pulled out of a Red Cloak's skirt. Jon found himself staring at the helmetless Red Cloak, blonde hair matting to her forehead. "Lady Brienne." In the corner of his eye, Jon found Tywin swinging at his side, but he was as agile as he was strong. Nimbly leaping away from the swing, he crouched and swung Longclaw fluidly through the air. Before Tywin knew it, a sharp thud hit his right leg. Jon had severed it clean off, a cleaner wound than the Lion of Casterly Rock deserved. Before the first stabbing pain shot up his spine, Tywin collapsed onto the ground. Standing tall over the prone form of her longtime foe, Brienne of Tarth raised her sword with hardened lips. "You killed him! With blood magic!" Pain searing up his mutilated leg. Tywin barely noticed. Barely. "I did." The Lord of Casterly Rock did not beg, or show weakness. Breathing deeply, Brienne raised her sword. "In the name of Renly of House Baratheon, first of his name, rightful king of the Andals, Rhoynar and First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms, I sentence thee, Tywin Lannister, to death." With nary another word, Oathkeeper plunged downward, only to be parried by Longclaw. "No, Lady Brienne. He will stand trial." Brienne stared at her emperor, jaw set in annoyance and anger. But she obeyed, sheathing the sword. "At your command, sire. But let me do the final deed when the time comes." Jon nodded. Gritting his teeth, fighting down the scream of pain that formed in his throat, the mighty Lord Tywin Lannister faced down the blade of Jon Snow of Winterfell. Just the reverse of when his house had faced Lord Eddard Stark at the start of the chaos that engulfed the world. "Tywin Lannister, in the name of the people of the realm, you are now my prisoner." End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that. Yes! Yes, 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 yes. That is one confrontation that I have wanted to happen in the show. Jon facing Tywin because of what he did to little Rhaenys and Aegon and Elia. He killed his stepmother as well. I mean, oh my god. What? That was so intense. I'm actually like buzzing now. My throat is really sore, but I don't care. That was so fun. Dang. Talk about the middle of the end. Yes. Ah, they've done it. They have Highgarden. Finally, those 2 chapters was something else. Anyway, I hope you guys have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Make sure to check out my other videos, like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that bell to be notified for whenever I upload a new video. Bye, my guys, gals, and non-binary pals. Take care of yourselves, and make sure to look out for yourselves as well. Bye!